On this episode of China Unscripted, the Chinese Communist Party is waging war by taking advantage of American corporate greed, and it's putting all of our lives at risk. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnesta.
And joining us today is Mike Bowen, co-owner of Prestige Ameritch, a medical supply company. Mike, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, on this show, we've all been talking about how bad it was that the Chinese Communist Party has been controlling the global medical supply chain. So it's great to talk to somebody who has been talking about that for 15 years, even before the show began.
Yeah, it's something that, I just know my little piece of it. We're involved in masks and respirators. And in about 2004, all of America's major mask and respirator makers left the country. And we decided to start a mask company in the interest of national security. We saw a vacuum and we were very naive. We started telling the story basically that hasn't changed for 15 years, and that's that China is going to end up controlling the U.S. mask supply. A pandemic will come, probably from that region of the world, and America's mask supply will be cut off. And for 15 years, I couldn't get it. Well, for 13 years, I couldn't get anyone to believe me. For about the last year and a half, they have. So,
well, I don't know, considering where we are right now and how China is going right back to making most of the masks, and American mask manufacturers are at risk of getting shut down again. I think no one still believes you, even after the pandemic.
I mean, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, a global pandemic coming from China controlling all of our masks. I mean, who would believe that, right?
It's surreal. The whole thing is so weird. In 2007, I thought it was so obvious. I thought, again, we were naive. I thought if I notify hospitals and notify the government that all of the U.S. mask makers have left and China is gaining control of the mask supply, that's a big problem. It's a national security problem, but I couldn't get anyone. I mean, literally, I couldn't get news people, politicians, hospital administrators, group purchasing organizations. Heck, I even went to the Hospital Risk Managers Association meeting, and I said the mask supply is going to collapse, and you're going to get sued because you can't protect your people, your staff, and your patients. And you're going to get sued because I've been out here saying this for 10 years publicly. And they yawned. I mean, I couldn't get anyone to listen. I felt like the only sane person in the asylum. Literally, yeah.
So what was the reaction? Was it just disbelief, or was it, oh, well, this won't be a problem?
Apathy, disbelief. And I'm the only one. Here's the problem. The problem is I was the only one saying this, the only one in my industry saying this.
Which is insane.
And so all of my competitors who relied on selling foreign-made masks were dismissing my warnings. Here's another problem. If a hospital looks at their masks boxes, they can't tell where they come from. The mask market leader marks their boxes, product of USA, further processed in Mexico. It's attorney speak for, we send some fabric to Mexico. They completely make the mask in Mexico. I even reported this to the Federal Trade Commission, and they said it's legal. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's like sending a roll of sheet metal to Mexico, totally making a Ford F-150 pickup truck, sending it back here and put product of USA on it. It's that kind of stuff needs to stop, because if right now all of America's hospitals decided to buy American, they wouldn't know if they bought American or not. And there's a 95% chance they're not buying American.
So back in 2004, why did all the American mask manufacturers move over to China? What was the appeal?
It's pretty simple. Hospitals don't just independently buy products. They all belong to buying groups. This happened about 30 years ago. They all joined these giant buying groups, and they bid out the products. Like they'll say, okay, now we're bidding out masks for 2,000 hospitals. And the low bidder wins. Well, doesn't take long to figure out who the low bidder is going to be. It's going to be Asia. And that's why so many of our critically important medical products, masks, respirators, drugs, all sorts of things come from China. It's all about the money.
And that's the real problem with this, because the Chinese Communist Party, it's a state-controlled economy. They understand having control over the global medical supply chain is really important for them. So they are able to flood the market with, it's basically dumping medical supplies. They make things below the market cost so they can drive out any competition and gain total control.
That is what we're seeing. They sell masks for a penny.
Literally a penny.
A penny. Yeah, imagine that. Making a mask, shipping it here, selling it for a penny. That is impossible. The nose wire, just the bendable nose wire across the top of the mask costs more than a penny. It costs more than a penny to ship it here. The fabric costs more than a penny. An American-made mask, you can buy 3 of them for the price of a gumball. It's a dime. Is that a big deal? No, it didn't used to be. Masks cost less than they did 30 years ago, folks. American-made masks cost, you can buy 3 for the price of a gumball. And yet China sells them for a penny. And I guess they must be being subsidized by the government, because no business person is stupid enough to sell a product for a penny. It costs them a nickel or 7 cents to make.
And I think that really shows the intention of the Chinese Communist Party with this. It's not about making money. It's not about doing business. It's about unrestricted warfare. They want this control.
I'm not a politician. I'm about as politically incorrect as they come. But it sure looks like that to me. I mean, we're 15 years old, and we do not have an international business. Why? Because China's giving away the product. It's everywhere. Something interesting that happened 10 or 12 years ago is France realized this problem, and the French government put out a bid for a billion masks or something, which started a couple of French mask makers, because they said we're dependent on China. But I couldn't get our government to understand that or to react to it. Now, one thing that's interesting is Congressman Michael Burgess. Look him up. He was speaking at our factory. You can find it on the internet. Look on YouTube. Look up Michael Burgess and Prestige Ameritch. After the last pandemic, I convinced him and the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, who was most recently the energy secretary, to come and speak at our grand opening after a pandemic, because we're going to protect Americans. Ironically, 11 years later, he's co-chairing the subcommittee that I'm testifying before last May, saying what the hell happened. And I'm saying, hey, you were there 10 years ago. I tried to get you to help me, So, I mean, listen, folks, there was not a rock that I left unturned on this issue. It was my mission and obsession for 15 years.
So tell us a little bit about who you approached in the U.S. government. What the response was. Did you manage to talk to people in the federal government, in the executive branch?
I talked with the DOD, the VA, Congressman Joe Barton, Congresswoman Kay Granger, Senator Patrick Leahy. An associate of mine spoke with Schumer, General Mattis. I wrote General Mattis. I wrote to President Obama, President Bush, President Trump multiple times. The only responsive agency that I found was a division of HHS called BARDA, B-A-R-D-A. They're the folks who fund new countermeasures for pandemics and things. The first director of that was a man named Robin Robinson. The second director was an interim director, Richard Hatchett, and the third was Rick Bright. And you'll maybe remember Rick Bright was involved in the whistleblower case in which I testified. All 3 of those fine public servants said, Mike, you are right. We're not allowed to talk to reporters about this. we agree with you. If you can get hospitals and hospital group purchasing organizations to call us, we will verify that we think the mask supply is going to fail. Here's the shame. I couldn't get anyone to make the call. They didn't want to know. It's all about money. It's all about saving money, not saving lives. The message of the mask supply is going to collapse and your patients and your staff are going to get sick, and it doesn't have to happen. We're talking about pennies here. They don't want to hear that message. Hospitals want to save money.
Gosh, I'm just thinking about like all of the rhetoric behind like, oh, how important, it is to go into lockdowns, how important all the vaccination efforts are. And yet the government wasn't willing to spend pennies to save lives with masks.
Well, the government and hospitals and hospital group purchasing organizations, everybody in the whole chain. And I want you to think about something here. The people in the hospitals that I have access to, they're incentivized to save money. The people in the group purchasing organizations are incentivized to save money. When a guy comes in and says, your mask supply is going to collapse, your people are going to get sick and die for no reason, I can fix that problem. It's like I'm speaking a different language. Their eyes glaze over. And again, I couldn't get them to make the call. I said, here's a 202 area code. Here's HHS in Washington, D.C. This is a high government official. Robin Robinson, his pay grade, he's like an admiral. Call this guy. He will verify that your supply is going to collapse. Now, I can say this. A couple of people did. World famous MD Anderson Cancer Center. They've been a patient. They've been a customer of mine for several years. They believed it. Robinson actually got on a plane and went and spoke to a group of people down in Houston, not selling masks, of course, but just saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. This was several years ago. MD Anderson said, we believe you, and they switched. Only one other big hospital system did, and that's Texas Health Resources. In Texas, they have about 30 hospitals. And by the way, they were the hospital that had the Ebola patient. So I've been protecting those guys for a long time. But by and large, people just didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it.
Was that also the problem in the government, is the money issue?
I don't know what the problem was in the government. I used to be really altruistic, and I thought that the folks in the government were really smart and were really up on stuff. So that's why at the beginning of this, I thought all I got to do is bring this up. But it didn't work that way. I'll tell you how bad it was. In 2006, we started talking about this. In November of 2007, HHS came to us, visited our factory. I've got their presentation that they gave us. And they said, we think the mask supply is going to fail in a pandemic. And we said, yeah, we've been saying that for a year. We're so excited you're down here. Let's fix this problem. And they said, oh, no. We're only authorized to study the problem. And I said, I'm not kidding. We're only authorized to study the problem. So since then, since November of 2007, I latched on to those guys like a leech because they were the only government agency, even though they said they couldn't fix it, didn't have the authorization to fix it, they could verify it. Because otherwise, I'm just a mask salesman out telling people the mask supply is going to collapse. I'm the only one doing it. So why will people believe me? So I kept thinking, hey, these people believe me. They're an important government agency. They will verify what I'm saying is true. And yet I couldn't get people to listen to them. I don't know if you guys ever saw the old Warner Brothers cartoon about the guy who finds a singing frog. And he finds this frog in the cornerstone of a building they're tearing down, and it starts singing Broadway tunes. And every time he rents a big hall and has the frog out and it's going to sing. And the problem is the frog only sings when it's with him alone. That was HHS for 13 years. They were my singing frog. They would sing to me. I could call them. I could email them. They'd say, yes, the mask supply is going to collapse. And I'd say, well, here, Infection Control Today wants to interview you. Oh, sorry, I can't. Robin Robinson was going to endorse the Secure Mask Supply Association. Look up securemasksupply.org. I have not changed that since 2014. That thing has existed since 2014. He was going to endorse it, and HHS attorneys said he would get fired if he did. So I'm out there twisting in the wind on my own for 13 years with HHS saying, you go, hey, keep going, keep telling this story, it's true. But I couldn't get them to publicly endorse it.
So about 10 years ago, there was the big scare over the swine flu.
Yeah.
And that was, fortunately, it did not become the kind of global pandemic we had in 2020, 2021. But what happened then? Because that should have been a pretty big wake-up call, right?
Yeah, you'd think. You can go back and look at a Lou Dobbs CNN story that's on YouTube that I did 10, 11 years ago. My business partner was on Neil Cavuto with Fox News, and it's all the same stuff, just what's happening now. Everybody say, how did this happen? Why are we unprepared? Boy, we better fix this now. And when it was over, everybody went back to the same thing. We ended up firing 150 people that helped save a lot of hospitals. We had to raise $1 million to stay in business. We came right to the brink of going out of business because everybody went back to their Chinese and Mexican-made products. And let me say this: even now, hospitals and GPOs are saying, "Yeah, we're gonna buy some American products, but we've got to, we have budgets, and we're gonna keep buying about 80% Chinese masks."
Oh my God!
Well, so give us.
Yeah, it's that bad. It's that bad. Yeah.
So that sounds crazy, but on the other hand, are they saving a substantial amount of money? Because how much does a hospital save, a typical hospital save in their annual budget, buying Chinese masks versus American masks?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but listen to this. As you know, as everybody knows right now, billions of dollars of masks have been bought in the USA during this crisis. The governor of California spent $1 billion with $3 N95s.
Wait, sorry, $3 for an N95?
$3. He bought $1 billion worth of Chinese N95s for $3 a piece when I was selling them for 79 cents. Okay, here's the deal. Billions of dollars of masks have been bought this year in the last 18 months. The whole damn market is $150 million during peacetime. 150. So what's the savings on that? Let's just say that my products cost 30%, 40% less. Okay, what's that, $50 million? The whole damn problem for $50 million? It's awful. This is a tragedy. This happened for pennies. 6,000 hospitals, $50 million divided into 6,000 hospitals. We're not talking about a lot of money. I have said many times that America's hospitals and group purchasing organizations, cost savings to them is like crack cocaine. It trumps everything else, and they will risk their patients' lives and maybe not look that way and try to not think this is going to happen and try to pretend that they're making good decisions because they're reducing the price of healthcare, but it's all bullshit. They're endangering their patients to save pennies. They're chasing pennies to China, and they're putting their patients and their staff and Americans at risk to save pennies.
You sell masks, but I got to say right now you're making me pretty sick.
Oh.
Well, and part of the problem here too, think about it. What am I? When you boil it down, I'm a business owner, but I'm a mask salesman. So people will look at me and go, "Hey, nobody else is saying this. You're going to make some profit." I even had a reporter 6 months ago say, "Do you ever feel guilty about profiting off the misery of others?" And I said, "Well, does your cancer surgeon feel guilty about saving your life by removing your cancer?" Hell no, I don't feel guilty. We've crawled, my company, my business partner and I have crawled through a lot of broken glass. It's been damn hard. 15 years to get to $10 million in sales, almost going out of business, always trying to do the right thing and being ignored. And you say, okay, well, why did you do that? Why did you tell a story that nobody believed? Imagine it. Imagine a salesperson telling the same story for 13 years that nobody believes. It's the only story I had. And it was real and it was true. And I knew people were going to die. I couldn't stop. It was an obsession. I sent thousands of emails. I talked to everybody I could talk to. I was on the news countless times. And what would happen every time the flu would happen, a local camera crew would come out and say, so are you selling a lot of masks? And I'd say, yeah, but that's not the story, folks. The story is the mask supply is going to collapse. Americans are going to die. And then we get a president who makes fun of the pandemic, calls it a hoax, makes fun of masks, makes fun of people who wear masks. I mean, the whole thing was crazy, and it continues to be crazy. We've got people out now. I saw a news story last night. There's people, some state somewhere is setting up secret vaccinations so people can get vaccinated and their friends won't know, so their friends won't make fun of them. I mean, this is like a bad movie. I totally don't understand it. I don't understand the whole thing. It's sickening.
Well, I just like your whole speech about how like these, hospitals are putting people's lives at risk for pennies. Like that just makes me think like, oh, like all the talk about socialized medicine, like what would that really look like? It seems like it'd just be more the same kind of bureaucratic saving money over people's lives.
I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that question. I'm just out here trying to stay in business and trying to survive. By the way, the last year and a half our business has been way up, of course, but it's starting to go down now. And all of the new mask makers, there's probably 50 of them. They're all going to go out of business. All of them.
When you say new mask makers, you mean American manufacturers?
American manufacturers that started up during the pandemic, either to make money or because they had a patriotic feeling. I think there were some of both. They're all going to go out of business. The peacetime market won't support them. They have substandard products. Their products cost too much, even against American-made masks. And the government is not planning on buying lots and lots of masks to make them survive. The government also has told me, and I talked to the White House. They are not going to. Our government doesn't have either the authority or the guts to ban Chinese masks. So now they're talking about the possibility of maybe subsidies or the possibility of tariffs. But I don't know. I said a minute ago that I started out as an altruist, and now my feeling now is I don't want to know about our nuclear program. If the folks in charge of our healthcare are this bad, I don't even want to know about the folks in charge of nukes.
I never thought about that, but now I will think about that every night I go to sleep.
I mean, I had the head of the National Stockpile, a guy named Greg Burrell, tell me face to face, right 3 feet away from me, that he didn't bother him that China controlled our mask supply.
Really?
Because
5-6 years ago, because it's cheaper. And we're saving money.
Okay.
But what boggles me about the money is, like you said, that it would only cost $50 million a year to buy Made in America, divided among 6,000 hospitals, right?
Yep.
So that's like $8,000 or $9,000 a year per hospital, which is like less than the cost of one surgery. It's such an insanely tiny amount of money compared to the tens of millions of dollars that are flowing through hospitals every year that I can't even comprehend why they would even bother trying to save that amount of money.
And versus the risk of having a authoritarian communist country that is at war with the United States have that kind of leverage over us.
Right. And then on top of that, like in 2020, remember those protests with like nurses and other healthcare workers who were like, protesting the lack of PPE, right? And I remember that being all over the news last year. You'd think that they would try to do something.
It gets worse.
Oh, good.
Right now, yeah. I'm drowning in 95s. My warehouse is full of them. So are my competitors. And guess what? Hospitals some hospitals are still making their healthcare heroes, which, by the way, it doesn't cost anything to call somebody a hero, but it costs $1 to get somebody a respirator. They're making their healthcare heroes wear dirty respirators because it's still legal.
Oh,
geez.
Yeah.
No.
Right now, millions of respirators are available. Any hospital can buy respirators and allow their healthcare heroes to wear a clean mask with every patient, which was the law before the pandemic. In an emergency, then the government said you can wear them longer, and now they're being made healthcare heroes are being made to wear masks multiple days to save money.
Oh my gosh, like an emergency order because there weren't any masks because no one was listening to you for the past decade. And now they're just like, hey, we can use this to save even more money. It's mind-boggling.
Welcome to my world. This has been my life for 13 years. And I would say things to myself and my wife like you just said all the time. This makes no sense. It's surreal. It's mind-boggling. How can this be? Why aren't people seeing this? It's not a big problem. In fact, I could send you 500 emails right now. I could go through my emails and send you 500 emails that I sent to politicians and people in government where I said, this doesn't cost money. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking you for orders. I'm asking you to acknowledge the problem and get on board. Say that this is a national security issue. And then I finally said, the last few years, I'm thinking, okay, people aren't doing it out of responsibility. How about fear? So then I started saying to hospitals, you're going to get sued. I'm out there making a lot of noise. I'm on the news. This is a problem. The government acknowledges this problem, and you've got your hands over your eyes and your ears. If people die, and it's determined that you could have prevented this, you could have given them proper PPE, but you didn't because you're saving money, you're in trouble. So, and I kept telling the last few years, I've been telling the government that, okay, guys, if you don't want to spend money, let's just scare them into it. You know, if they're not going to do it out of corporate or to be a good corporate citizen or to be moral, let's get the attorneys involved. Because think about it. If a hospital administrator is told by the government, not by Mike Bowen, mask salesman, told by the government, your mask supply is going to collapse, you're not going to be able to protect your employees, you're kind of liable for protecting your employees, just letting you know. You would think that the hospital's attorney goes, hey, maybe we ought to spend that $6,000 and buy American-made masks so we don't get our asses sued off when we can't protect our employees. But no, I couldn't even get people to do that. Now, one other thing, too. It's really scary. It's like the boy who cried wolf story. We've had SARS, we've had Ebola, we've had H1N1, we've had COVID. None of them we don't see dead people lying in the streets. It's not like the Contagion movie or the Outbreak movie. It's not scary. It's not scary enough. And I think that those 4 or 5 events are what people think a pandemic is. So when the big one does come, it's going to hit us like a freight train because people don't get it. They don't realize that there is the possibility that where 2 out of 10 people die instead of 2 out of 100. 3 out of 10 die. H5N1, one of the bird flus, it's like has a 50% kill rate. So we're playing games here, and politics involved, and that mess with our previous president dismissing everything. We have this unreal view of what we're dealing with here. And now we've got people not getting vaccinated. We've got the Delta variant, which is bad, but another variant could come out that's incubated in these non-vaxxers or Africa. Africa has 1.2 billion people. 1% are vaccinated, which leads me to think, folks, we're not at the end of this thing. I think we're in the eye of the storm. I really do. I think we're in this calm period in the middle of the hurricane. And because of the anti-vaxxers and because of variants and things popping up, I don't know. I'm really worried about the future.
So has the attitude of hospitals or the government shifted in the middle of the pandemic?
Hospitals, a little. Some are going to buy American. Some are going to buy some American. Some will keep doing what they're doing. The government isn't going to buy any more respirators, isn't going to stop China from sending masks here. I'm seeing it at a pretty close range because of what I do and how much I've been in the news. They call me, they talk to me. I'm seeing a lot of things that worry me. It's like giving a team of people a really important task, but they all have handcuffs on. There's certain things they can't do and certain things they can't say, and they work by committee instead of somebody that's decisive and smart and wise that just says, okay, here's what we need to do. Do you agree? Do you agree? Let's go. It's just all this committee speak. And it doesn't give me confidence that when we come out of this, we're going to have anything safer than what we have right now.
Well, Mike, they can study the problem.
They can.
Yeah, they're good at that. By the way, let me say something too. In 2006, President Bush put out his Presidential Directive 21, which was to have the government look at the pandemic plans that they had and make adjustments if there were gaps, because Katrina didn't go so well for him. So he put this out. And that's why HHS came to see us in 2007, in November 2007. And I can send you the presentation. I have a presentation from HHS that said the master plan is going to fail. Yeah, in 2007. And I can tell you this too, and I said this during my testimony before Congress. Robin Robinson, Richard Hatchett, and Rick Bright, they would all three fix the problem had they had authority. And Rick Bright at the end, in my testimony, a lot was made of my what I call my deep email. I sent in January of 2020. I sent Rick Bright an email and said we're in deep. The master plan is going to fail, and then he sent it up the ladder. Nobody did anything, and then that ended up in the whistleblower thing. But that's what that was all about.
So after the swine flu, the National Strategic Stockpile was depleted. It was never topped up. After the coronavirus pandemic, has that been topped up this time? Does that even matter if it is?
Yeah, they put some in, and there's an RFI out now, which I just submitted. They're going to buy 127 million more ear loop masks, which I and a bunch of other people are going to bid on. But
so you said 127 million. That's almost nothing. I mean, if there's 320 million Americans, then this is going to last a third of Americans one day.
Yeah, now they have some already. I don't know how much, but I think their thinking is just for healthcare. I don't think anybody's working on a plan to make sure all Americans have masks. And I could be wrong, but I haven't seen anything like that.
Is there a quality concern with the masks coming from China and Mexico? Because I know there's been some issues with counterfeit masks coming in.
Like fake N95 that aren't actually certified for that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There was a whole bunch of fraud. I was working with the FBI. I was being impersonated. We have a really good reputation, and I'm kind of all over the news. So people were impersonating me and trying to get people to send them money. In fact, one woman called me one day and said, I'm about to wire you $1.6 million. I'm just checking to make sure this is all legit. And I said, it's not me.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Somebody in India copied our whole website and had they changed one letter in the word. Our address was prestigeamertch.com. They changed one letter and made their own website, and it was all of our stuff.
Wow. Hey, I know how we can fund this show.
Oh God.
There was a whole lot of fraud. Right now, though, for months I've been hearing crickets. Nobody's calling. Nobody wants masks.
Yeah, I was wondering, going back to what you said about California buying these N95s from China for $3 each, and you're selling them for 79 cents. It just seems insane. But Yeah.
Well, the government's very good at spending enormous sums of money when it's politically expedient.
Well, I heard somebody call it the money fan. I'd never heard that before, but somebody who dealt with the government said, yeah, if the money fan comes on, he said it's crazy. But yeah, now we haven't seen much of the money fan. We got a small FEMA contract. But what's ironic is the people who caused the problems are the ones benefiting. The people who left the country, all the big manufacturers, they're benefiting and getting big government contracts, and they caused the problem. They left America. They caused the problem. I warned everybody for 13 years, tried to get them to come back. They didn't come back. My predictions came true. They got rewarded. It's a little bit like a fireman who is an arsonist, goes and sets a fire, and then gets a medal for putting out the fire.
It's like that Ray Bradbury book, Fahrenheit 451, right? Where the firemen actually set the fires.
Well, that's different because they're not really rescuing people.
No.
Yeah.
So,
But
I was thinking about 3M, right? Because they essentially got their operations in China essentially got nationalized
by the Chinese government
because they weren't allowing any manufacturers to ship out of the country. So they didn't learn their lesson.
No, and then here's another thing that happened too is when China, first of all, China cut us off. And then when they got their problem fixed, they flooded us with respirators and masks at ridiculously high prices because we couldn't get them, America. So China is selling respirators to Gavin Newsom for $3 a piece that probably cost them 30 cents to make. And morally, that's some pretty bad stuff going on that way.
Not to mention they were able to use that leverage to encourage the U.S. government to not look into the origin of the coronavirus too much.
Yeah, I don't know anything about all that, where it came from or whatever, but it's here. It's a mess. It's going to be a mess for a long time. Now it's affecting young people, and a lot of Americans think it's a hoax. I heard somebody got a blood clot, so I'm not going to get the vaccine. And what I say is, yeah, but it's like the guy who says, my uncle, if he'd have been wearing a seatbelt and hadn't been thrown free, he'd have died. So that's why I don't wear seatbelts. I mean, you know what? I call it the dumbass apocalypse. I have never seen more stupidity in my entire life. I mean, we all grew up getting vaccines, and you get your measles vaccine and your polio vaccine, and these things work and they save lives. And now we've got states having secret vaccinations so people won't be embarrassed to go get vaccinated.
You're beginning to remind me of Red Foreman a bit now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the crazy thing about this is it isn't a partisan failing. Like, you've been talking to the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, now the Biden administration.
Yeah.
And it's like Cassandra, the Greek myth. I'm going to educate the audience about Greek mythology. She could see the future, but she couldn't get anyone to believe her.
And then there was the Trojan War.
Yeah.
Yeah, Congressman Sarbanes brought that up he said, you're Cassandra. And so did Marin McKenna. Here's somebody else you need to interview. You need to interview Marin McKenna. She is the author of the book Superbug, and she's a journalist. She's written for Wired magazine. She and I have been talking about this for 4 years. She did an article on me several years ago, and we kind of became colleagues or friends. Yeah, she's a pretty interesting person, but she said, yeah, you're like Cassandra. You tell the truth and nobody believes it.
Oh boy.
Gosh. How did Prestige Ameritch survive all these years?
Innovation and stubbornness. You
don't strike me as a stubborn person, really.
we had nothing else to. I mean, it was it. We had everything we owned that was invested into this, and we had a really good reputation. We used to make 87% of the mask supply. Our building used to make 87% of the mask supply. We worked for a company called Technol, Tecnol, back in the 80s and 90s. And Technol had 87% market share when Kimberly-Clark bought it in 1997. Several years later, Kimberly-Clark moved it to Mexico, and that same year, all of its competitors moved away. That's when and then a year or two later, we said, hey, this is a national security problem. Let's fix this. So we've been making masks for, I call my business partner, Dan, the last Jedi. This guy has forgotten more mask making. He's forgotten more about masks than most experts know. You know, he's been making masks literally since the early 70s when he was 16 years old.
Wow. So I guess the question is, what can anyone listening do? I mean, screaming into the void for decades sounds great, but what can we do?
Just individual Americans.
Yeah.
I don't have good news. I mean, yeah, I could say write your congressman, and then 100 people are going to do that, and it's not going to help. I don't think there's anything they can do. I just don't. I mean, it's depressing. It's depressing.
So then I guess the question is, what can we as individuals do to prepare ourselves for the inevitable, really bad pandemic that's coming?
Practice defensive driving. I mean, you know, if everybody else is going to be a crazy driver, you don't have to be. So, and again, here I am, a mask salesman saying buy masks. So it always looks like I'm trying to make money, but I'm not. We don't even sell to the public, hardly at all. We have a community service amount of masks that we sell, and if you go to our website, it's even hard to find, and they're really expensive because we don't want to sell them because we're not set up to sell one box at a time. We're set up to sell truckloads. Everybody ought to have some masks, and you know, it's like the government says, you ought to be able to survive for a couple of weeks with food and water and all that stuff. Put masks in your emergency kit, and buy them from somebody else so so it doesn't look like I'm trying to sell you. But I think everybody just needs to realize that we're in a new era with global transportation systems like they are. Anything that breaks out anywhere is going to be everywhere, and when it happens, you can't buy masks; they're all gone, or they're $10 a piece. You know, a product that I'll give you one. 10 years ago was the last time the government bought from us. They never bought from us. Couldn't get them to buy from us. They're buying Mexican-made masks because they were cheaper. And they bought about 4 million masks 10 years ago. Didn't use them. Put them in warehouses. And about 2 years ago, they auctioned them off. And some knucklehead, whoever bought them, then when the pandemic started, they started selling them on eBay for 10 times the price and started selling them on Amazon. And listing Prestige Ameritch, new Prestige Ameritch masks. So protect yourself from COVID. First of all, the masks are 10 years old. They weren't made for COVID. We have no idea how they've been stored for 10 years. We don't have any idea if they're any good anymore. And I'll bet I had 1,000 people call me. What's the expiration date? Are these masks good for COVID? Blah, 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 blah. On masks that I sold the government 10 years ago, and the government sold to some knucklehead probably for nothing.
Wow.
I mean, again, it's surreal. This whole thing was surreal.
And we've learned nothing.
Who was it that said one thing people have learned from history is that we don't learn from history?
Very true.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that long ago.
What wasn't long ago?
I mean, I was just thinking about swine flu wasn't that long ago, but also we're still in the middle of the thing right now.
Yeah. We're still in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And we haven't learned from COVID enough to buy American masks.
Or even that this is warfare. The Chinese Communist Party is using this as a form of warfare.
Yeah.
But we can say, buy masks for $8,000, $6,000.
Unrealistic or predatory Chinese pricing is the world's biggest Trojan horse because it's decimated our manufacturing ability of the world because everybody goes to China for these products. We won World War II because of our manufacturing. We turned, factories that were making toasters into making hand grenades. Well, there aren't any toaster manufacturers anymore. All of our manufacturing is now in China. So, having a Starbucks make bullets doesn't work. We're going to be in trouble. China is in a very powerful, very scary position with the United States when it comes to medicine, when it comes to manufacturing anything. And I've said to people who say, well, I'm buying it from China because it costs less. And I said, well, okay, look around you, look out your window. Everything that you can see that is made by a human can be made and sold way less in China. So we just have them make everything. Do we have them completely control everything we're doing? Do we just give up the reins of the United States to China because of everyday low prices? Yes, we do. That's what we're doing as a nation.
That's a great slogan. Everyday low prices.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is something people think that, like, if there is an emergency, like World War II, we'll just start back up American manufacturing. We'll just flip a switch and it'll get back.
No. Yeah, the old flip a switch. No.
Well, why doesn't that work?
Knowledge. The people who used to make those products they're gone. I mean, you lose when you quit making something, you forget how to make it, and you can't just go back and start making things like that. And the government has a word. Have you heard of the term warm? WARM, warm base. They call it a warm base when you have, like, if they say, hey, Mike, we want you to have 10 respirator lines just ready to go at any time. Well, that's a warm base. They do that because they know that or if they do it, it's because they know that we can't get this fast unless it's a warm base, unless somebody's there either already making this stuff or set up to make it. Starting from ground zero and trying to make things, you can't just start up and make jets or guns or whatever. You have to have those things that are close, at least people who work with metal and things. And all those people are still leaving. And what's interesting is if you go to the National Hardware Show in Las Vegas, there will be a whole corner of the exhibition. There's nothing but Chinese companies trying to replace American-made products, lawnmowers, whatever. And the addiction, the attraction to making more. It's, again, let me just keep saying this. It's all about the money. It's all about profit. It's all about greed. And China has figured that out. They go, hey, all we got to do is have low prices, and we're going to own America. We can buy America with these low prices. We'll make all of their products. We'll make all of their drugs. We'll own them. They can't start a war with us. We'll just cut off the medical supply. So, and I don't know what all is controlled, but I have a feeling it's probably too much. And I don't know if we've gone past the point of no return, but I think if we haven't, we're close.
Speaking from like a mask manufacturing perspective, I mean, how long would it take to start making, like let's say you didn't have a warm base. Is it even possible to start manufacturing, masks if there's like huge demand?
Yeah, a bunch of companies did that. Within 6 months or so, you can be making more masks. But all of these companies are going to go out of business. My company is going to suffer. We already suffered 10 years ago doing this and almost went out of business. The next time the boy cries wolf, the village people ain't coming. We've gotten hurt too badly. The mask makers have gotten hurt too badly, and they're going to continue to get hurt. So I just don't know if anybody would want to do this again. Because right now we've got 6 respirator lines that are sitting there not running. We have 150 less people than we did 6 months ago, and sales are going down. And we have contracts. One thing we did that we didn't do last time, we were really gullible last time. And hospitals were desperate. They were calling us, can you help us? We can't get masks anywhere else. I understand you have masks. And I say, yeah, folks, but you got to stay with us. We're building a factory. We're hiring people. We're building machines. You got to stay with us. Gullible, naive Texans. And And they said, we will, and they didn't, and we almost went out of business. This time we were a little bit smarter and said, you got to sign a 2-year contract. But then what happens when that contract gets over, there's probably going to be a period of glut. And then also, as these mask makers are dying, the new mask makers, as they're dying, they're going to be giving away masks for anything just to recoup some of their money. So it's going to be painful when this ends. I don't think anybody's going to want to do this again. Gear up again without assurances. Also, if you go back and look at my testimony from last May, I got in an argument with Buddy Carter, a congressman from Georgia, who kept saying, just gear up, be an American, be a patriot. And I'm going, I did that before. I saw that movie. It doesn't end well. We geared up and almost got killed. Give me some assurances, give me a contract, and I'll gear up. And I was getting hassled for that during that meeting. And now people are realizing, oh, okay, yeah, he was right. All these people who did gear up and built all these machines and factories, they're all going to go out of business. Most of them are going to go bankrupt.
All right.
Well, I just hope our nuclear weapon supply is not in the same state.
Hey, yeah, that's the bright side. Maybe it'll just be like a quick nuclear war and we won't have to deal with a horrible pandemic. There's the silver lining of the nuclear cloud.
Yeah, there you go.
So Mike, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep warning everybody?
Well, right now I'm pounding on the government to do more to level the playing field. Here's what I'm telling the government. Again, I'm not asking for orders. I'm not asking for business. What I'm saying to the government is level the playing field. Keep these cheap imported products out. That will expand the market by 20 times. Think about this. Before the pandemic, 95% of the market was imported. Make that go away. That means the market is now 20 times bigger. So some of these new mask makers can survive. They're going out of business now. Several of them already have. You can't keep a business going when you don't have any sales. You can't do that very long. So these guys are going out of business. And hopefully the government will do that. And I keep doing that. I do every interview that I can to try to get the word out, to try to keep this issue going, because I know what's going to happen. Let's just say it ended today and nobody needs masks and the pandemic's over. It's old news. Now we're talking about some other news. Nobody's talking about fixing the mask supply. So while people are still worried about it, I'm going to keep on squawking.
We need to completely decouple with China. That solves everything. Most things. The government will still be stupid.
It just, one thing I found is that words are cheap. It's easy to call a healthcare worker a hero. That doesn't cost anything. It's easy to say, "Oh yeah, I support American products." Yeah, absolutely. People ought to buy American. And then they go to the Home Depot, and the U.S. made drill is $59, and the Chinese made drill is $29. And there, with nobody looking, they buy the Chinese drill. And that's the way it goes. It's the lure of low prices. Sam Walton figured that out 40 years ago. The Chinese figured that out. All we got to do, hey, folks, I can picture them in a meeting 20 years ago. Hey, all we've got to do is offer stupid low prices. They're going to become totally dependent on us. Sure, it'll cost us $1 trillion to do it, but we're going to be in control. We control the world. And that seems to be what's happening. It's not, people aren't going to China because they have the best products. Most of their products aren't that good. They're going to save money. And it's Americans trying to save money may be the death of us.
Very literally.
I also think there's a huge problem with not even being able to find things that aren't made in China.
I was looking for a tea kettle. I could not find a tea kettle that was not made in the USA.
Yeah,
made in the
you
USA.
said made in China. You meant made in the USA. Yeah, about 5 years ago, when I was probably extra pissed off one day about this whole issue, I had to buy 11 items from Lowe's Home Improvement Center. On a Saturday, I went to Lowe's. I said to myself, I'm going to buy American. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to search out and find American products. I bought one product, a plunger, a toilet plunger. The rest of them, everything was China.
So we're still in the fight. With American plungers, we can turn back the tide.
There you go, man. Let's the plunger factory guys can now make tanks, right, in a war. Here's what I'm glad you brought this up, because here's where it happened. It wasn't the American consumers who did this. Well, directly. What happened is the Lowe's people, the Walmart people, the Home Depot people said, hey, if we sell our own brand and it's made in China, we can make way more money. So let's sell Rigid instead of Black & Decker. Let's sell Cobalt instead of DeWalt. And go into a Home Depot. And that's what they're doing. So DeWalt's over here, it's a little section, and then their brands are really big. So they have taken the choice away from American consumers. They've taken the choice away by switching. And the hospitals did the same. Sorry. The medical manufacturers who make masks did the same thing. They didn't make a big announcement. Hey, folks. Hey, American hospitals, we're switching. We're going to start making our products in China now. No. Boxes look the same, except instead of South Dakota or Warrendale, Pennsylvania, or Fort Worth, Texas, the products were now coming from China. So they could save money. The money. Greed. Who was it in Wall Street? What's his face? Michael Douglas.
Greed.
Greed is
Gordon
good.
Gekko.
Greed is good.
Yeah.
Greed is good. No, greed is not good.
Yeah.
And
And
it's funny people use that slogan, greed is good, as if it's a positive thing. But the whole point is he was the villain of that movie, right?
I don't think people treated him as the villain of
Yeah.
that movie. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, you make
Capitalism works, but it definitely needs to be regulated and monitored, because the greed. People are by nature greedy.
it certainly doesn't work when you have aggressive communist regimes with total control over their economy trying to undermine our systems.
Yeah. And I think the other point you brought up, Mike, which is a good one, is that a lot of these decisions are not being made by individuals. They're being made behind closed doors by corporations. And if there was some way that there was enough light shining on the issue that when whoever, whether it's a corporation or an individual who's they've got a choice between American and Chinese when they're buying something. And that choice, everyone has to make that out in the open. And especially corporations, if they have to make that a public and fully transparent, then they're going to be a lot less likely to make the decision to buy from China when the American one is only a little bit more expensive, and everyone else can see that they're making that decision. But it's completely opaque, except for the occasional Cassandra screaming in the wind.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's a problem that can be fixed. Not every problem can be fixed. And have we passed a point of no return? I know that people don't just buy out of patriotism. People make decisions based on their personal situations. And normally, like I said, Sam Walton figured out that if I'm the cheapest, I'm going to get the business. And the medical manufacturers have gone as well. Oh, here's another thing, too, is when one guy, when I say guy, I was born a long time ago, sorry. When one person decides to take, let's just say it's socks. Everybody's making their socks in North Carolina. And one person decides to start making their socks in China. Well, they start killing everybody else. Everybody else goes to China. So the result is that person had a temporary advantage. That advantage went away when defensively all of their competitors went to China. Now they're all making less money. The products aren't as good, and they laid off 10,000 people.
Yeah. And then when we enter a sock war with China, we're completely screwed. None of us have any socks, so we have to wrap our feet in cloth like Russian soldiers,
I mean, you joke, but textiles are important.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
another thing too, you think about this. My products, masks, are highly automated. They're not made by hand. They're highly automated. So hospitals weren't satisfied that masks were cheap enough by being automated and that we didn't have people hand making them. They wanted to further save money by going to China, where people make $1 an hour instead of $12 an hour here, and save that extra money from the people running the machines and taking the products off the end of the line. So it's yeah, I just keep going back to the thing, saving money is killing us.
And it's at a certain point, the prices from China are going to go up.
Right. And think about this. The people who used to go down to the Amana refrigerator factory and make a pretty good living, that factory doesn't exist anymore. And Starbucks doesn't pay that well. Now, I mean, these people, the middle class, the people who didn't go to high school, but are hard workers and they're smart and they need a good job. Those people are the ones who are getting killed by the Walmarts and Lowe's and Home Depot, taking everything to China, because these folks who used to work and make refrigerators and bicycles and TVs and things, those jobs don't exist anymore. It's either work at McDonald's or be college educated and have a job that these people cannot get now. So now you've got them saying, hey, McDonald's, we need we need to be paid a lot more because we can't live on what you pay. And McDonald's isn't saying this, but what they ought to be saying is, gee, we started this company based on 16-year-olds having their first job, not adults trying to feed their family. So the death of American manufacturing is just slaughtering the middle class, and it's getting worse. I mean, it's not stopped. The line to go to China and make products is still a long line and pretty wide too. So, and again, I'm just a mask maker. I mean, I see this little part of it, but the whole thing does bother me.
Yeah, really, the story you're saying is echoed throughout American society. It's the same story. We have to decouple from China, the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, let me say this. Every single day of the last, since the pandemic started, every single day, I've gotten emails from Chinese manufacturers wanting to sell me materials and machines or make my products. And I'll bet you there's probably 100 new mask companies in the USA last year. There were like 5 when we started. So those 100 are going to die. But there's probably 500 new mask companies in China. So things are way, way worse. After the pandemic, there's going to be so many mask makers out there in China flooding the U.S. with very attractive pricing that a lot of people are going to not be able to resist. And what I keep telling these people is, listen, just pretend it doesn't exist. I mean, it's like it's not real. They're not making money, and you're hurting our country, but they can't do that. It's the allure of low prices is, again, it's like a crack cocaine habit.
So not only did we not learn our lesson from the coronavirus pandemic, things are actually going to be worse, is what you're saying.
It could be worse. This all relies on the government. Right now, if the government doesn't level the playing field, we're screwed.
Decouple from China. All right. Mike, that was awful. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Well, I'm one of those people that if you ask me a straight question, I'm going to give you a straight answer. Sorry about that.
No, I mean, this is what we want to hear. We need to know.
I imagine we're all equally fun at parties.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, so Mike, thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that was a fun, lighthearted episode.
I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what we could do about it is commission a study.
Study the problem.
That's great.
Let's study the problem, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting when he was talking about how, there were some people at a certain level of the government who... No, that wanted to help, right? But then they were like, my hands are tied. I can't actually authorize buying masks or something like that, Yeah, just the levels of bureaucracy.
It's insane. Well, the best way to solve this is by giving the federal government more money, because that will free them from bureaucracy, right?
They'll have lots of money to study the problem.
Oh man. I mean, when he was talking about all of these mask manufacturers, these new American mask manufacturers that are all going to go out of business. So I bought some American made surgical masks from one of these new companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing a lot of sales lately, like 30% off masks.
Oh, that kind of sales.
Yeah.
Cheap it. Make it cheap.
Well, because I think they're essentially, I saw an interview with the CEO of this company who said they can last maybe another 4 months without any help from the government.
Well, that's what Mike Bowen was saying. That like, so they're all going to have to they're going to sell it for pennies just to recoup any kind of money.
And that's going to distort the market. And then also the Chinese mask manufacturers. Yeah, I remember hearing some people talking about how they were just getting random emails from Chinese companies after they stopped restricting the mask supply. Suddenly there was a flood of new Chinese mask manufacturers who were just emailing random people with China connections and offering to send them masks or sell them masks.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just this sudden surge of Chinese mask companies.
What upsets me is like how do you not see this pattern? Like, China undercuts the market, and we're like, oh, cheap masks, and then China completely cuts off the supply, and we're like, oh no, we can't get any masks, and then China sells them to us, and we're paying $3 a mask when we could get it at a quarter of the price, or even far less from Americans. But we pay it anyway.
Well,
and then China comes back now that there's a glut of American stuff on the market, and China's again undercutting the prices. And we're like, ooh, cheap masks.
Well, I think one thing that got lost in that is, Mike Bowen's company was selling masks for 79 cents, where Chinese manufacturers were selling them to Newsom for $3. But Mike Bowen could not, he wasn't able to supply all of California. You know what I mean?
Right, because they didn't have the capacity built up.
And then it takes 6 months to ramp up your capacity.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. And then
6
you
months
have
in a pandemic, you have to have American, what do you say, warm base, right?
Yeah.
You have warm bases.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, that a lot of the machinery gets sold off to other countries. It's just like this whole domino effect of these, the manufacturing getting completely gutted in the U.S.
And you can see how, if something really bad hits, it could just cause a complete collapse of American society and civilization.
I mean, this is not as bad as the PPE or the medical, medicine and that kind of stuff. But right now, we're in the middle of this huge shortage of all sorts of stuff, right? Because of these supply chain issues.
Mm-hmm. Just the fact that Chinese ports are totally backlogged.
Well, and now they're kind of backlogging American ports.
Yeah, the port of Oakland in California is there's, several weeks wait once ship is there in the bay before it can actually dock at a port and unload. That's insane.
Yeah, and I think I'm reading that it's really only going to get worse from here, that we haven't really seen this is not the worst part of the shortage, that it's going to get worse and it could last, another year.
Oh, good. Good.
Or more,
And the crazy thing is all the shortages we're seeing with the shipping containers that are causing this other domino effect. It's it could have been avoided if we just made most stuff in America.
And I think an important thing that Mike Bowen brought up is this is not just part of it is American consumers making a choice, but a lot of things happen behind the scenes that we have no control over. Like when China sells vitamins for pennies on the pound or whatever, below market value, and Kellogg's will buy vats of Chinese vitamins to fortify their cereals. That's not something any consumer really knows about or even thinks about.
Right, or has any control over.
Yeah. Because it doesn't, that is not something that can be solved by, I'll buy another cereal brand, because they're all doing it.
Yeah, I was at Home Depot. I wanted to buy a new toolkit. And I actually had a sales rep at Home Depot help me. And I said to him, help me get everything I possibly can made in America. And he's like, it's going to be more expensive. I'm like, I don't care. Like, see what you can do. And every single thing that there was an option for, I got made in America, and I could still only get less than half. And it was insane.
I mean, that's shocking. I always thought it was Home Depot.
Well, I mean, when he was Mike was talking about Rigid being I didn't realize that was Home Depot's, in-store brand.
Yeah, that was
then they
that was
shipped
a
off
good
to
take.
China. Yeah, it's so frustrating because I am really on a kick lately of trying to buy everything I can made in America, and just searching through because often you can't really tell where certain things are made.
Like Mike was talking about how it'd be like manufactured in the U.S. or whatever, but like really, assembled.
Yeah, that's very misleading. But and then I remember looking at sheets, trying to find sheets made in America, and there's one company that makes American sheets made from cotton grown in America. Because that's another thing, right? Where's the cotton
Most cotton comes from Xinjiang and slave labor.
So then they were talking about how you could buy towels made out of their cotton, made in the only factory left in the United States that could make towels. And you just think about, like, there's one factory in Georgia that can still make just like normal terry cloth towels, right? It just...
Don't forget to bring a towel.
What? There we go. Yeah.
Shelley, weren't you telling me about one city in China that makes all of the microwaves in the world for every company?
It wasn't. It was one factory in Guangzhou.
One factory.
Yeah. So I was looking at buying a new microwave, right? Just a normal countertop microwave, and I was looking at which are the best microwaves. And Wirecutter did a thing where they basically took apart a bunch of microwaves and discovered that inside they were all made by the same company called Midea, Midea, and it is one factory in Guangzhou that seems to be manufacturing all of the cheap countertop microwaves for every brand, almost every brand. I think Panasonic was the one that they didn't do, but basically you could buy any branded microwave you want.
So all these competing brands are actually made at the same Chinese factory.
Yeah, I think that actually happens a lot where a Chinese factory will make multiple will make the same product for a bunch of different brands, and you might have higher or lower tier materials or whatever, but it's made at the same place.
They say without bitterness, we wouldn't know what sweetness is. If it's all bitter, I'd like a little bit of sweetness in the mix.
I mean,
a little bit.
But that's why we have Shelley.
Oh yeah, I'm
a ray of sunshine, ball of thermonuclear fusion spewing out radiation.
I was going to talk about the difficulty of finding things made in America, which is
carry on,
which is a definitely really cheerful thing. So I tried to back a Kickstarter campaign for a clock, this alarm clock that was advertised as they were going to make it all in America. And it was this, analog quality, hand machine, whatever. It was supposed to be a great alarm clock. And the music to wake you up was supposed to be backed by science and composed by a Grammy-winning composer, whatever. It was a very expensive alarm clock. I backed it partly because it was going to be completely made in America.
Mm-hmm.
After they had collected all the pledges, then they sent an email to everyone going, well, actually, we couldn't find a manufacturer in America, and so we've decided to work with this great company in China, which will definitely guarantee the same quality that we were going to get from American manufacturers, and we feel really good about this. And a lot of people who backed it were upset, and their comments were full of people being like, I backed this because it was going to be made in America.
Well, I don't know why everyone was so upset, because clearly that is the best wake-up call.
And then they defended themselves, by saying that, well, we really tried, but, we were dealing with all of these. And to be fair to them, it was happening during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, we were dealing with a bunch of, shortages, and people couldn't guarantee how long it would take them to get materials and all this stuff. And then when we added it up, it would cost us $200 each to make this alarm
And
clock.
how much were they charging?
They were selling it for $250.
So,
And they were like, this is too expensive to make the alarm clock for $200. So we had to, and then, somebody introduced us to this great factory in China, and they have great quality control and all the stuff. And they're like, we wanted to make it in America, but we just couldn't.
so after they made this announcement, you were obviously upset. Did you like get your money back?
Yeah, I had posted a comment saying that I was upset about it. And, one of the reasons I try not to buy stuff from China is because of genocide of the Uyghurs and different things and slave labor. And they refunded me, and they refunded a bunch of people who complained. But also, once we were refunded, then our comments were hidden.
Oh.
Because then it's like we're not backing it anymore.
What's that company again, Shelley?
It was called One Clock.
One Clock.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably a little bit of a niche.
Yeah,
thing.
$250 alarm clock.
Yeah, right?
By a rooster born and raised in America.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was just
and
like...
you can't eat it, too.
Can't eat the alarm clock. But it was just this... I mean, I did feel a little bit bad for them when they explained the whole situation, where they were like, oh, like I could see that in a pandemic it might have been. But again, the reason that we have all these shortages because of the pandemic is because we've hollowed out our manufacturing base in the U.S.
And this is the thing. It's not going to get easier to wean ourselves off China as it goes along. It's only going to get harder.
I mean, we've already, like Mike was saying, we've lost a lot of the knowledge. I mean, when a lot of these factories move to China, they send their equipment over, or they sell it off. Like the equipment to make the stuff is not in America anymore.
You know who was right about this all along?
Kissinger?
No, the leftists who were protesting getting China to join the World Trade Organization, and the ones who were like, protect the American worker, don't let China join the WTO.
I mean,
that was the beginning of the end for American manufacturing and American wages.
You still have people like Bernie Sanders, right? Elizabeth Warren, even Chuck Schumer. They're protectionist on this one issue, but I don't know if they're actually doing anything about it besides
commissioning studies.
Or, it's a good soundbite, right? Like it's a good, you can talk is cheap, but actually bringing manufacturing back is going to be a hard struggle, and you might have to strong arm some companies or, get other ways to incentivize them, like what Japan was doing.
Speaking of talk being cheap, this episode is dedicated to all of the frontline heroes and their great sacrifices that they have made in the name of American corporate greed.
It's interesting also when he was talking about the people still reusing N95s. Most Americans are using cloth masks, which are not that effective. And compared to surgical masks or N95s or whatever. But, that was one of those things where the messaging from, the government was cloth masks because we didn't have enough surgical masks for healthcare workers. And now there's a glut of masks, but, people kind of just got used to wearing cloth masks.
Well, this is a danger that happens where temporary emergency measures become permanent. And I think that all of us have to be really vigilant that things that, we did or that we agreed to temporarily under emergency circumstances over the last year and a half don't become like a permanent long-term thing, unless they're good. I mean, there are some good things that can come out of it, but like, do we really want to give, for example, to agree to letting governments impose Chinese-style restrictions during, because it's an emergency.
Victoria in Australia just went on another lockdown.
That's Victoria, Australia is a whole other episode, and that's the state that has Melbourne. And their premier, Daniel Andrews, is basically, he was the guy who, against the wishes of the Australian federal government, signed a Belt and Road deal with China. And he's also the guy, he's a premier, not a governor, but he's essentially the most lockdown happy governor of like any place in the free world. For a tiny number of cases, they've put on unbelievable restrictions. And I'm only saying there's a correlation between that and his China deals, not necessarily causation, but it's a scary thing.
I mean, it's just because they're trying to go for eradication, right? But then how can you do that if you are in essentially the only countries that were able to go that route were initially island countries.
Right.
And then now even a lot of them are having trouble.
Yeah.
So it just the idea of being able to eradicate it in just one state in Australia and locking down every time until you do, you're never going to be able to open back up.
It doesn't make a whole lot of scientific sense, but
well, Matt's point was about, emergency powers becoming permanent. And, Star Wars prequels, they really taught us a lot. Chancellor Palpatine, he got
democracy.
And he got emergency temporary powers because there was a war.
One thing the U.S. government could definitely do is to revoke some of those emergency use authorizations that, like the one that Mike was talking about, that allows, hospitals to tell their staff to just reuse masks over and over
now,
again.
Since money is involved, I bet there'd be a huge protest from people in the hospitals who are the ones making the money. I don't think we'd hear much from the healthcare workers themselves, but there's now people incentivized to fight something like that.
Yeah, this is just one sign of how the entire healthcare system is broken when costs are disconnected from the people who pay them, which are disconnected from the people who need the healthcare or the people who give the healthcare. Like everything's so disconnected in that world that it's just like an insane knot of things that cannot be untangled.
I will say the FDA did just revoke their emergency use authorization for a lot of these N95 substitutes from China and other countries.
The KN95?
Yeah, so they're not, they can still sell them in the U.S. to consumers, but they won't be allowed to be used as a medical grade product used in hospitals.
But what they could do is change one letter in the URL for Prestige Ameritch and sell them.
That was crazy. But when what Mike was talking about and this goes back to your point about the healthcare system, the fact that all of these all these hospitals basically are in giant group buying co-op things where, hospital systems are already huge, and then the hospital systems all band together to buy things together. You say you did have the administrator of one hospital who wanted to buy American-made masks. Would he be able to do it?
Yeah. The solution really is we need to decouple the U.S. and China economy.
On our terms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because eventually China will do that on their terms.
Yeah, and we already talked about on the previous episode about how they're already starting to
trying to do that.
And yeah, it's once they can successfully do that, it's a sign that we've already it's gone too far.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. It's not going to be an easy thing to bring manufacturing back to the US. It's going to be painful, but if we don't do it now before an emergency, it's only going to get more painful when we have to.
And we're Americans. We can take the pain now. We can make the sacrifice. We can do it.
As Winston Churchill said, Americans will always do the right thing after exhausting every other option. And with that, thanks for watching this episode of China Unscripted. We are assembled in America, manufactured in China. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnesta.
Talk to you next time.